Welcome to Talking Events, the event industry podcast brought to you by Event Industry News. Podcast is being recorded from the Ticketscript offices in the heart of London's Silicon Roundabout district, I think they call it. And we should say a big thanks to the guys at Ticketscript for allowing us to set up and record these episodes from their offices. We're going to be talking about startups today. We're welcoming back to the podcast Mr. James Morgan from Event Tech Lab. James, welcome back to Talking Events. Jason Allan Scott from VenueMe. Jason, welcome along.
Thank you.
Jarrod Bischoff from Event Pro Finder. Jarrod, welcome to Talking Events.
Thank you.
Let's look at the prospect of being a startup in the event industry now. There's been a big boom in loads of companies and loads of offerings come into the event marketplace in the last few years. Jarrod, we may as well start with you. You've got a very recent experience of being an event startup. Is it daunting even contemplating it in the first instance and whether or not you should actually push ahead with it?
I think it is daunting, but before anyone starts, people need to have the why before they start. I think it's always good having an idea, and an idea is a dime a dozen. People have loads of ideas, but at the end of the day, it's the execution that defines us. Speaking from my own experience, Event Pro Finder has been an excellent journey for me to learn about businesses in general, but it's also been pretty scary. The first time I started it, I linked up with a bunch of developers that weren't that great. I didn't know that I wasn't in tech. I'm an events man. I've been based in events labor for pretty much 12 years of the time I've been in events. So the first time I tried it, it didn't work, but I learned a hell of a lot from it. And then I started it again beginning of last year. Built a really decent team around me. I have sort of my CTO based in South Africa. I have my designers and my bloggers in South Africa, which is great. I don't know if anyone knows the rand to pound at the moment. It just makes things a lot easier. And then I have sort of coders in China, and now with that it brings some challenges, but yes, it's been tough. It's been really tough.
From having your idea, before we move on and bring Jason and James into the conversation, from having your actual initial idea, which sounds like it was born out of actual experience.
Yes.
How long from having that idea to actually making that decision? Right, I'm going to do it. Was it quick? Was it a prolonged process?
It was almost instantaneous. It was your cliched light bulb moment. Just to give you a bit of background about Event Pro Finder, it is an event freelance marketplace. Now there are freelance marketplaces out there. There's freelance.co.uk. There's Upworks, which is the biggest freelance marketplace in the world. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but to answer your question, as soon as I thought about it, I instantly picked up the phone and phoned a mate, and it was a guy who had actually been made redundant at the time, and he had worked for a company for many years, and he wanted to go freelance, and he was really struggling, and so what I tried to do is create something that would help him.
Right.
And from that, the idea just grew and grew and grew as I did more research and so on.
Let's bring Jason and James Morgan into the conversation here. Jason, from having the initial idea for VenueMe, how quickly was that as a process, and how, again, I asked that question, how daunting was it to think, right, should I pursue this idea?
I think there's two questions there. One, is it daunting to have a startup in the events world? No, because the biggest problem with any startup is entry to market. And the entry to the events market is probably the easiest market in the world. It's not qualified, it's not unioned, it's not registered, it's a cowboy industry. So all I do is I phone 6 of my friends and I say, hey, you got any events coming up? Give me a call, I'll sort you out. Boom. Tech. Now tech is a whole different industry. I had the idea of VenueMe, similar thing. I had the I was going to venues and I was showing them how to sell. I was going to venues and explaining concepts and how things work, and I did incredibly well. I'm very thankful for that, for the teams I worked with. But when it came down to it, no one wanted to do cold calling, and no one wanted to do all these things I was trying to come up with. So the idea of VenueMe and something where it showed them who was looking in real time, that they could call, and it would be a warm call versus a cold call, that was really easy. And I would say I had the eureka moment, but I've been doing startups since I was 15 years old, and I didn't want to do another one, to be completely honest. And getting into the tech world, I found incredibly hard, because there are these so many opportunities to do it. China, Paraguay, South Africa. I've just come back from San Francisco talking to a different tech provider in every aspect of my tech, from user interface to what the app will look like, to what the web interface will look like, to the types of language that'll be used. And I found that to be incredible. It's been a real, like you said, a real learning for me, which I'm loving, because I was feeling I was doing what a lot of people do. You do what you do well, and you just keep doing it, and you try and avoid what you don't do well. Where now in the startup, in the event tech side, I'm messing up pretty much daily, but I'm loving it. I'm learning so much, and I'm speaking to venues again with fresh ears, and finding out things that they need to be added to the app and added to the technology, and because of that, it's getting more and more exciting to build.
James, having had experience of dealing with not just your own, but lots of other startups, and working with a lot of the companies that have come into the industry, do some of them make the mistake of not accepting, as Jason pointed out, what they're not very good at? Do they come to the idea? Do some of them actually fail because they've come to the market and they've created this startup and think that they've got a brilliant idea, and they're not actually willing to listen to other people's input? How important is that?
There's a difference between the people that are leading the startups, and some of those people come from the event industry, so they're very sensitive to the needs and the nuances of the industry. And then you get people that think, hey, this is a great idea, I'm going to do this bit of tech, but they have no idea of how the industry works. Mm-hmm. And I think it can be daunting for both parties, but on the other hand, it's also a journey of self-discovery. It's also a journey of what you're good at, what you can get good at, and how you take on board, especially from an event professional point of view, of understanding the tech industry, understanding the jargon, the process. Mm-hmm. It's a real self-development process as well. So from that point of view, can be very rewarding. For people from the tech business that decide to do an event tech product, they don't get that kind of reward. They also quite often don't understand the industry as well. So that can be problematic, and that you see startups, funerals for startups happening all the time.
If there's an underlying tone of skepticism in what I'm asking and how I'm questioning startups, is it because that's a cultural thing? Is it inherently British for us to be a little bit standoffish? Whereas if we were hosting this podcast in another country, perhaps we wouldn't even be looking at this as a topic. We'd be like, yeah, come on, startup, let's get going.
Absolutely. I mean, I just left the Silicon Alley, which is just behind Venice Beach in LA, and there everyone has a startup. You meet a DJ at a nightclub and they've got a startup on the side, and it's tech based, and everyone's applauding it and everyone's excited. And you meet a model and a waitress, and she's a model / waitress / actress / tech startup. But no one's poo-pooing it. Whereas in the UK, we're maybe a little bit tougher. Maybe we're a little bit more protective of our industries. Maybe we're just sort of, I don't know, a little bit calmer, a little bit less cheerleader.
I've got to disagree with that, because I think that just from the history of this island, I'm from colonial stock. We went out from a long time ago as entrepreneurs to discover the world and start up something. And I think that inherently we have a heritage of that. And I also think that in terms of what's happening in London, particularly in terms of tech and around the other cities in the UK, you do see all that innovation taking place. And I don't think you just need to say that startups are about tech, because there's all sorts of other startups going on as well.
Sure, yeah.
Somebody starting a sandwich company or whatever,
Indeed, we're talking about any business, really, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know we're focusing on tech today because we're all tech startups, and the Event Tech Lab helps tech startups. But I do think that, you know, this is a country of innovation, and we lead in so many different ways. And yeah, startups might be daunting, but it's self-development.
But actually, if I can sort of
Sure,
jump in very quickly, I will agree with you. The Brits can come across a bit negative sometimes. I don't know if it's because they like a grumble, but no, I think if you look at the startup community, especially within the events industry, I think we are pretty supportive. You know, I bumped into this chap in the lobby, and you know, we began chatting, and instantaneously we were talking about our businesses, our, you know, what we love. So I think within the events community, we are actually quite buoyant.
There is a lot of tech that's very much an integral part of an event now. There are certain elements which now I think are getting towards the point where there's no argument. You essentially need to have that as part of it. However, is there still a danger, and I hate to say it, but is there still a danger that people have an idea where there's actually no problem, a solution without a problem, rather than a problem and then finding a solution for it? Have certain tech startups been guilty of maybe overcomplicating what wasn't a complicated issue to begin with?
In terms of the different types of technology you get, so you're looking at production-based technology for events. So that's something like Jarrod's doing or Jason's doing, and then we get the audience engagement stuff, and then we get the marketing stuff, the registration platforms, Ticketscript, for example. So if you look at it in the context of those three areas, what you find is that they do enhance events and enhance the management processes that are taking place. Some people might not find it suitable, and they might not want to replace their paper-based Excel sheets or stuff like that. But what these bits of technology do is that they aimed at making working more efficient, or in the terms of audience engagement, creating more participation at events and in terms of conferences. I don't know what these guys think, but
I agree. Sorry, I agree. I mean, you know, the three areas that you talked about there, all those three areas are like mainly focused at capturing data, and then like each component does different things with the data through a clever bit of tech. I think in the end, the tech will continue to be problem based. So us finding solutions for problems. You usually find if it goes the other way around, it doesn't work as well. Yeah.
So perhaps if I've been misled to thinking that there are certain companies that I've seen in the past where I think, hold on, that's a solution where there's no problem, perhaps the mistake that's been made, or perhaps not what's been made clear enough, is what that problem is, and that's where the startup could learn.
Well, I think it's funny you just said it, and both gentlemen eloquently sort of responded to it. Sometimes I'll see something, like I was at the Great British Entrepreneur Awards, and there was a huge queue outside the venue, and we were taking forever, and it was ice cold, and my wife was wearing a dress, and she was freezing, and I think, I should have brought a coat. And we eventually get there, and I said, so sorry, what's taken so long? Why didn't we get in? And they said, well, we're using a new registration tech to get everyone in the room, and it jammed, it just got stuck, it's frozen on screen. And times like that, I think, I miss just having a piece of paper and a pen, because no one got stuck. If the pen ran out, they got another pen, and they just scratched you off and moved on. But like the two gentlemen so well said, there's probably all this data behind it. Maybe, once it takes it in, it's putting it into a system which says they came, which then generates a thank you letter and speeds up people's jobs and puts everything together. And there's so much back end now. That's what's amazing about it. But there are times definitely where I'm the same, and I'm just thinking, really? Or we can't get a mic to work, and I'm thinking, what happened to the all-day mic? Or someone just got up and screamed across the room? Or
But the loud halo.
And I think what's important is that if you are a startup, just classic marketing is, what's the benefit to the buyer?
Sure.
How do you articulate that? And some companies are very good at that. Some startups are good at it, but some startups are not very good at it. They sort of tell you about how the tech works, but they don't tell you how it's going to be of benefit to you. So then you can't say, as the buyer, well, that's my problem. Well, this is going to benefit me and solve that problem. And I think that in the communications to do with startups and how they pitch their products, needs to be improved, and that's why the Event Tech Lab's out there to try and help people do that.
I was going to ask, how often does that actually crop up where, what percentage of new startups that you're interacting with actually need help in eloquently putting together and articulating what the problem is, therefore this is how their product can work, and what percentage come to you and have it well put together and don't need that sort of help?
I'd say it's the 80-20 rule.
Okay.
80% need some help on how to articulate their benefits, how to get to the right segments, and how to appeal to the pain points that people feel when they're producing events.
Because Jason, just going back to an earlier comment about it being easy to break into, phone some guys that you know in the industry. What if you're a startup and you know nobody in the industry? You've had an idea, you're pretty sure there's a problem. So how easy is it to actually sell a product that nobody knows about, that nobody's ever heard about, if you're not part of the industry already?
I think there's the mistake is in the verbiage. How easy to start to do a startup in the events world? Dead simple. Because to organize an event, you know someone that's going to have an event, a wedding, a Christmas, a birthday, a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah. It carries on. A technology, different world. You're now looking at how most of us, Pareto's law we just mentioned a second ago, 80-20. We look at the majority of how we handle that. What is the problem and how can we fix it? Pretty much totally oppositionary to Steve Jobs's just be creative, and if it creates something, amazing, and if it can make something even better. But no one needed a car. We needed a Foster horse, but Henry Ford built a car. We didn't need an Apple. We had IBM, and they were doing great. There was no need for them, but we did. How easy is it to get into the tech and then sell it? I have no idea. I mean, James will be much better than me. I know I found it a lot easier, exactly for the reasons you've said, because I've worked with venues. I'm in this industry. I do think it's one of the best industries in the world. I'm one of the biggest spokespeople for its greatness, and that we are a great community. We support each other. We help each other. I'm enjoying my time as a tech startup in this much more than I did when I tried to do trying to change the funeral industry, and the funeral community is very small and they don't want to change things. And the same when I tried to do the beauty pageant, which we sold to a magazine, or when I tried to do fruit juice or eco disco with silent disco and bringing that in big, it was very different communities. It can be completely harder. It is easier with the events industry. We are more supportive of my feelings.
Would you concur with that, Jarrod? Have you had experience when you've actually, gone to speak to organisers, for example, and said, "Look, this is what I'm going to be doing. What are your opinions of it?"
I would absolutely agree with Jason. The reason why I will agree with Jason is because I haven't launched Event Profinder yet. We are launching beta, cross fingers, hopefully on Monday. I know that's going to come and bite me in the bum. I'm quite proud of myself. I said bum. But yeah, so I will absolutely agree with him, because at this point in the process, I'm trying to collect as many people interested in testing my platform as possible. I'm calling them my early adopters, and I'm going to be giving them something if they spend some time with me. I've done my research, and I'll be monitoring them as they click through, and etc. But the response from that alone, and I'm not just talking about people that I'm friends with on Facebook, or that I'm linked to on LinkedIn, but the general response has been amazing. It's been fantastic.
Is it supportive industry as a whole then, James?
Well, no, I think it's supporting an idea that the industry is sensitive to, and it comes back, full circle to, do you know the events industry before you decide you're going to do a bit of tech that's going to solve a problem, or have you just got a great idea but actually you know nothing about the industry and it has no benefit to anybody? And that's the difference.
With so many options now available, and so many startups, and the market has boomed, hasn't it? The last 4 or 5 years, so many more companies coming to market with a product, with an offering. How developed are the organisers? Perhaps I don't know, James, whether or not you'd be able to answer this first of all. But how developed are the organisers in keeping abreast of what's happening, keeping up to speed with it, and understanding what it is that's coming to market?
They're not keeping up to speed. It's a rolling wheel. So, just in terms of some of the people, the big players have been around for years, and the kind of coding language that that they use within their tech. I mean, it's totally out the window now. That kind of coding, for example, has been superseded like 10 or 20 times. So the code that these guys are using and the code, say, somebody from 15 years ago is using, are two completely different things, do two completely different functions or more functions. So, yeah, things are changing on a daily basis. Here's 2 new startups that just happened, and I know 5 or 6 others that are around. And that's not going to stop. So yeah, it's a rolling wheel, and event organizers aren't going to be able to keep up with everything. So what they've got to figure out is what's relevant to their business, where are their pain points, and what kind of technology can I look at to solve those pain points, rather than trying to look across the entire board of technology that we have out there.
What's the contrast that you've experienced, Jason, between event organisers who are very, very proactive in keeping abreast of what's developing, how they can utilise it, and what it comes down to is how they can actually deploy it effectively within their event, isn't it? Not maybe so much how much they know about the details of how that actual product works and all the back end of it, but how can I deploy it and make use of it? And that's really what we're wanting them to keep abreast of. And so what's the contrast in your experience between the good and the bad?
My experience is very different, only because I have a niche. My niche is venues. I'm from a venue event background. Even when I was in agencies, I found it very difficult to step outside of the venue world. And venues are the last bastion of holding out. You know, they still have the big diaries. They're still calling the same freelancers or the same agencies, and it's quite hard to sort of introduce tech to them. And every time I do talk tech, I actually point them to James, because I'm kind of saying, have you seen what he's got, and did you know about this, and have you heard of this? And venues are going, well, you know, we're still using the little light in the front, and it's all wired, and there's black tape on the walls, and you're thinking, wireless came years ago. We're really, really fighting. I just did a venue recently where it took me almost 2 months to explain why they shouldn't have big old monitors, why they should go, you know, flat screen, or why they should be using Apple Mac products. And it was it's a silly conversation, really, but maybe it is exactly what they said. It's that need. Is there really a need? They don't feel there is. Calls are still coming through. They're still booking event space. They still use the same systems they've always used. The old calendar on the wall, which has got a red line when it's taken, or a blue line when it's provisional, or, you know, and it's I'm giving them all these great ideas, and they probably are all amazing ideas, at least I hope so. But the venue's thinking, my need is still get rid of a room because it's a perishable good, get as much money as I can out of the room while I get it, and make sure everyone leaves safe, and speak about it so we can do it again.
Is it short-sightedness then? Is it not seeing what this could bring long-term? That, the diary's full this year, we don't need to bring that stuff in. Is there a short-sightedness that ultimately could come back to bite them in 3, 4, 5 years' time?
Definitely,
Yeah.
but I think the average, sorry to interrupt, James, I think the difference is that if most event venue owners, including myself as an event venue owner, you are thinking, while I have the lease, you know, I'm going to try it for my 2 years, my 3 years, my 5. Maybe you sign a 99-year lease, but no one's thinking the full 99 years. You're thinking your first 2 to 3, and you just want it to be busy during that period. And whatever it takes to be busy during that period is all you're really hoping about. It's very rare. I say that as I think of a venue that totally is in diametric response to what I'm about to say, but it's very rare that a venue manager isn't looking down at his space and looking past December. He's looking at this year, this diary, and how full are we?
Sorry, James, you were going to answer that as well, weren't you?
I mean, really what you're talking about is adoption to technology, and I think you also have to segment that as well, because you'll see a lot of, if we go to the 3 areas again, production, audience engagement, marketing, you'll see a lot of marketing companies like Ticketscript, for example, are selling to the organisers that, you know, everything's going to go through their website, and that's fine. Then you see the audience engagement stuff, and this is where it starts to get a bit more problematic, because those kind of tech companies are going to event organisers and saying, this is going to be fantastic at your event, and the organiser goes, yes, it's great, and they buy it, and then on the day the AV company or the sound company or whatever have no idea what's going on, because they don't know anything about that kind of audience engagement.
Sure.
And I think there's a bit of a disconnect there between the old style, what I call the hard technology providers, and the soft technology providers. There isn't much of an interface there. So I think we need more education in that area so that the organisers are going to get proper delivery. So for example, your example of the registration system that messed up. Now if the hardware technology people had been involved in that process, could have gone a lot further, but they need to understand what's out there as well. So just a My Mic or Crowd Mics or Catchbox, for example, they sell to event organisers, and the event organisers will say to the AV company, how about this? And then they go, oh, I've never dealt with that before, or I don't know what this is. And then that's where we have problems. In terms of the production stuff, that's again selling to organisers, and that's a bit of a smoother process, but it's that one in the middle that's...
So that example there is perhaps with tech that is offering a level of interactivity or something whilst the event's happening that needs some level of integration or could have some level of integration with other production elements. When we look at your particular example, Jarrod, we're talking about perhaps something that's going to aid an organiser at an earlier stage than that, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, well, at the moment, my business model's still very much B2C. It's based around getting experienced freelancers on board and creating a trustworthy marketplace so that organisers can come and browse through the list of skills they need, whether it's an AV technician or a chippy or a designer, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of marketing my tool, I mean, I haven't really sort of got there yet, but hopefully I can start it, and it can be fairly organic. Well, they say organic's the best, and then see what I go. But like at this stage, I'm sort of just testing the functions that I think my users will need. After testing, I could, it could turn out that my users don't need the functions, and then it could be that I turn it into that I turn my business model in a B2B. I could sell to suppliers and so on.
Do you think people underestimate sometimes the value as well of talking to other suppliers? That they think sometimes, I dare not talk to other suppliers for fear of letting the cat out the bag, or them maybe stealing my idea or running with it. Do you think there's actually more value in whether that be an interactive app that could link with the AV company at an event, or talking to suppliers within the industry and saying, look, here's what I'm going to do, what skills would you be looking for if you were sourcing people? Do you think that people are a bit too afraid sometimes of sharing their information and engaging with other suppliers, not necessarily organisers, suppliers?
Yeah, I don't think it's about being afraid. I think it's about patches and territory and things like that. And especially in the hard tech companies, they are established incredibly important element into that whole production. And the event tech are the new kids on the block, and in a way they, if you're a big hard tech company, you've invested millions and millions into products, and you're updating those products on buying new lights, new speakers, whatever the case may be. With tech companies, it's slightly different. You build something and you improve it, but you're not making the same investment year after year like the the hard tech companies. So yeah, it's about patches and territory.
Yeah, but I still think, and sorry to cut across you, I still think that this is a really small industry. As far as the hard tech goes, and speaking in terms of production, there are companies out there that are making breakthroughs in screen technology, and we've seen them at exhibitions. Absolutely. And stuff. So I mean, I think they do talk to each other. If you only need to go to a few networking events in the industry, and you will see most of the time the same faces. I think they actually do talk to each other.
There is a differentiation. I've noticed it in a number of events, and you look at something like Event Tech Live, for example. The audience that goes there is very, very different to any other trade event that takes place within the event industry. So there is almost this invisible line, isn't there, between the event tech community and then the rest of the events industry, where in actual fact, surely we should be at a point now where things are actually coming a little bit closer together.
It's funny this. I was at Event Tech Live, and it was my first one, and I loved it, and I met some incredible people. And again, thanks to one of the panels James was on, I went around and met everyone that was on the panel. And just after that, I was talking to someone, and someone said to me, did you notice the different audiences, this compared to whatever the most recent thing was to that? And I think it might have been IMAX. in Frankfurt or something like that. And I said, no, I must be honest, I didn't really. And he said, there's a huge difference. You call any agency right now, just call someone. So I picked up the phone and I called Zybrant. How you doing? What's the question? And my friend, who I will not mention, said, ask them who Julius Solaris is. And I said, do you know who Julius Solaris is? And they said, never heard of him. He said, put the phone down. I said, okay. Now, ask anyone in this audience who Julius Solaris is. I went over to the first person, it was actually a Dutch girl who was just on the panel. I said, you know who Julius Solaris is? She said, absolutely, he does the blog. And he said, that's the difference in audience. It's a different magazine they read. It's a different thing they listen to. It's a very different audience. Now, as I said, I didn't know enough to even know that, but he did. He definitely could pick up the difference in an expo crowd and a travel crowd and an event tech crowd.
And I think it's back to the adoption rate as well.
Sure.
So, yeah, you've got all the techie developers and the UI guys and the cloud guys. Then you've got the people like us who are from the events industry who are doing event tech. And then you have people in companies that know a lot about event technology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Ben Wallace at DRP, for example, knows everything about event technology, and that's his job there. But then there might be somebody in a venue that's just doing the booking register, and they know nothing about event technology. So it's all about adoption, it's about education, and that's really up to the event tech sector to sort out.
Now, I should ask, what's as we're sort of coming towards the end of time, but looking at Event Tech Lab just for a moment, James, and what's happening with it at the moment? Who are you working with that's new? What are the common issues that you're helping to tackle or to resolve or to assist with some of the organisations that you're currently working with?
There's two general themes. There is adoption of their technology,
sure, yeah,
and getting users, and so we aid them with exposure, visibility and stuff like that. And the second one is about funding, because obviously there's a lot of bootstrapping in this industry. And for anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's basically you're paying for it out of your own pocket, working in your backyard or back office or living room. And there's a lot of that going on, and these two guys know exactly what that's about, because they've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
And it's sort of getting to the next funding stage, and actually that is another issue, and that's one that Event Tech Lab is working on with other people in the events industry to try and sort that out. So yeah, we should have some news there.
Well, I think it's important that James has touched on funding, and it should be addressed, even albeit briefly, as we're coming towards the end of time. But it's got to be funded. There's a lot a man can achieve with a laptop, a good internet connection, sitting on his sofa. But there's only so much that he can achieve when he ultimately wants to take that step from it being an idea on his laptop or her laptop to becoming a business. And if you haven't got the money behind you to go and pursue that, that's when a lot of people can stop. Because if they don't know where to turn to, what are they going to do with that idea?
Okay. So
I like how you said okay, like, oh, it's fallen on
right,
me.
Okay.
Let me take this
thanks. I think these days you can't have a conversation without tech without mentioning Eric Ries's lean startup. Now that's a totally different conversation, but Eric Ries's lean startup model is about creating an MVP, which is a minimum viable product, a product with as minimum functionality as possible, so you can test it. You test it, then you learn from the testing, then you go and make the changes necessary so that you can move on. I am following the lean startup model not by choice, but because I have to, because I don't have the funds. James said that we are bootstrapping it. We are absolutely
sure
bootstrapping it. So for me, it's about, I've created something. Hopefully from Monday, I can start to get some feedback. Hopefully it's good feedback, but if it's not good feedback, that's fine. It's all about iteration, learning from it, adapting it, and then sending it back out to your early adopters. So I haven't quite gotten to the stage where I'm knocking on doors, cap in hand, but hopefully in the next sort of couple of months I will be.
Have investors become more savvy to this particular industry, Jason? So if you can actually just persist enough to get your product, not necessarily to market, but to the point where you have it operational in beta and ready to show and demonstrate what it can do, are people becoming more knowledgeable at this from an investment point of view?
Definitely. I've done nothing but investment meetings for the last 3 weeks. And what I didn't know, which I wish someone had told me, is funding is a job unto itself. You stop everything. You're not picking up clients anymore. You're not beta testing. You're not MVPing. You are literally going to VCs and angels and seed investors and finding out about SEIS and EIS and all these terminologies. And it's an entire new world of commerce. And in some ways, financiers and investors and seeders and whatever are very excited about the events industry because they hear these amazing numbers. $40.1 billion, 44.2 billion euros, these massive numbers. But no one seems to be able to prove the numbers. And that's what the investors keep coming back to me and saying is, it sounds great, we can see it working, but where are these numbers? Show us. Show me one, and you go to, I'm just going to use the example of London & Partners, not that it is London & Partners, and you say, give me these actual figures. I want to see the finance numbers, word for word, line for line, broken down in territory, area, country, space. It doesn't exist. And I had a great conversation with David Adler from BizBash magazine, and he said the same thing. He said, these are amazing numbers that gets us all jumping up and down. But where are they? Where are the physical? And when it comes to these seed investors, and maybe my number's too big at the moment, maybe it's not, maybe it's too small. In fact, someone told me when I was in LA, it's way too small. They're going, no, it's an industry I don't know yet of anyone that's become a unicorn out of it. One of our friends has a company called Fat Unicorn, big shout out. And his hope is that he'll be the first unicorn in this. And what I have heard, what I keep hearing from all my funding conversations is the Field of Dreams concept. Build it and we will come. If you build it and you get 100 clients, we'll come in with the money because you've got proof of concept, you've gone through your beta testing, and you've come back on a bit of a power strength. You're not coming from a position of weakness, as in I have this idea, I have a laptop, I have broadband, give me something, but actually I've built a product, I have a market, I've got client acquisition, I've got cost of client, which is a big thing in LA, I found, and San Francisco with this whole clack, and then we'll come with the money.
And I think the other thing worth pointing out, just on the numbers there, saying 42.3 billion is the current estimate of the UK events industry, and that is an estimate, and it has to be adopted by the DCMS and London & Partners and people like that. The Conference Industry Council in the US estimates the world events industry is worth between 300 billion and 500 billion. I mean, that's a huge number.
It's bigger than cars.
Yeah, I know, but it's again, it's an estimate, and the problem is that on a yearly basis, the governments around the world measure their economies, and they have something called standard industrial codes. Okay, and an industry is measured via those codes. We don't have a code for the events industry. We don't have any occupation codes. Well, we have 3 occupation codes for the events industry: event manager, venue manager, and exhibition manager. And all of us around this table know that there's a lot more occupations in the events industry than those 3 codes. So that is a problem in how to measure the industry and having an official Office of National Statistics measurements because of the problems with the coding in terms of the economy. So these estimates that Jason are talking about, these are compiled by people who are event industry based. MPI have done studies, Leeds Beckett's University's done studies, the BVEP's done studies on these numbers, and they have to make a guesstimate, and they are quite accurate, I think. If you look at the methodologies behind that research, they are trying to make the best guess.
And I think that is a whole other episode in itself, talking about the measurement of economic impact and how we actually start putting that into a more structured way and creating a more structured industry out of what is already a glowing industry. We need to wrap it up there. We should point out and say thanks to London's newest road engineering startup that have chosen to join us during this episode. So apologies to anybody who can hear the incessant road digging going on in the background, but hey, that's the joy of coming to a central London location to do the podcast. We should thank our guests before we wrap up. James Morgan from Event Tech Lab, Jason Allan Scott from VenueMe, and Jarrod Bischoff from Event Profinder. We're going to be tweeting links via the @TalkingEvents Twitter account to all three of those organisations and companies, so that if anybody wants to follow up and get in touch with you guys directly, they can do. There are loads of Event Tech Lab events taking place.
29th of February is the next one.
29th of February is the next one, and loads of events. So if you're a startup listening to this and you want to get in touch with the Event Tech Lab or go along to one of their events, loads of help for you out there. It leaves me to say thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to the podcast via iTunes. You can watch the podcast on the Event Industry News website. You can also subscribe to the Event Industry News YouTube channel. Thanks very much, and you've been listening to Talking Events.